Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves wandering under the soft, flickering lanterns of Baghdad's endless market streets, where silk merchants whisper under awnings, where cinnamon and sandalwood perfume the thick, warm air, and where shadows dance like quiet ghosts along clay walls. You glide past glass jars filled with saffron as the moon hangs swollen above the rooftops, and you pause by a busy little stall lit with olive oil lamps. There, sitting cross-legged upon a worn rug, is the Christian broker, a man with careful eyes and a smooth, convincing voice that drips with practiced sweetness as he bargains with buyers from Damascus, Cairo, and Samarkand. He greets each passerby with an eager bow, showing them folded damask cloths, ivory combs, and rose oil in bottles stoppered with beeswax. As he haggles, his thoughts wander to his debts. Oh yes, debts you probably won't survive if you owe them in medieval Baghdad, because creditors here send their complaints directly to the Sultan's vizier before dawn. He adjusts his sash, pockets a small bronze coin, and scans the crowd again. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and what time it is right now in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The market bustles into the deep hours. The Christian broker's voice grows hoarse from praise and persuasion, and he thinks of the wine waiting at his table. Historians still argue whether Baghdad's street markets stayed open until the first call to prayer or closed at midnight when the city watch made their rounds. Either way, he begins packing up, humming an old Syriac hymn under his breath. The copper lamp beside him sputters as the oil burns low, leaving the tiny grains of frankincense on his mat glowing like embers. Suddenly, laughter breaks out near the food stalls. You turn and spot performers juggling pottery shards under a flaring torch, their faces painted chalk white. The broker watches, smiling despite his fatigue, and remembers a fringe tidbit he once heard, that street jugglers often dipped their fingertips in quicklime to harden their skin against burns and cuts. The trick, they said, was to avoid inhaling its bitter fumes. Though if they did, well, let's just say they juggled fewer pots after that. A young boy runs past, nearly knocking over a stack of pomegranate crates. The broker barks a half-hearted scold and continues gathering his goods into cloth bundles. As he works, he senses someone approaching from behind. Turning, he sees a stout, red-faced merchant he knows well, a seller of fish so rank that even Baghdad's stray cats tread carefully by his stall. The fishmonger claps a meaty hand on his back. "Brother, come quick!" He wheezes, eyes wide with alarm. "There's a body behind my stall. Dead, I tell you, a hunchback, mouth open, staring at the moon. I'll be hanged for this. You must help me." The Christian broker wipes his brow, his pulse flickering with dread. A dead man in the market was bad enough, but a dead man discovered near your business? That spelled days of interrogation, confiscated goods, and the real possibility of execution. He glances at his nearly packed wares and thinks bitterly how this evening was meant to end with a cup of date wine, not a corpse. "Show me," he mutters, rolling his eyes so deeply it nearly counts as prayer. They weave through the dim alleys between stalls of pottery, herbs, and beaten copper until they reach the fishmonger's stall. There, by a stack of rotting carp and gray mullet, lies a man small in stature, bent-backed, with his stiff hands curled against his chest. His lips are parted as though mid-laugh, eyes glazed under the moonlight. The broker crouches down and mutters a short prayer under his breath, just in case the soul still lingered close by. The fishmonger trembles beside him like a slaughtered hen hung from its feet. You watch them under the thin moonlight and hear the hush of wind rustling the reed mats. A faint aroma of fenugreek and death hangs heavy in the air. "Get hold of yourself!" The broker snaps, clamping a hand on the fishmonger's shaking shoulder. "If the guards find him here, it's your head. But if we carry him away, well, let's just say the market has many alleys and many shadows." He looks at the dead man again. Historians still argue whether this event occurred under Sultan Harun al-Rashid or later under Caliph al-Mustansir. But either way, the law was the law. Bodies meant blame, and blame meant blood price. With grim resolve, he gathers his courage like folding a stiff blanket and nods to the fishmonger. "Come on, help me lift him." You watch as they grab the hunchback under his stiff arms and drag him into the darkness between two shuttered spice shops. The lanterns of Baghdad flicker far above, casting the narrow path in shifting gold and black stripes. Somewhere, a distant muezzin begins his slow, melodic call, and the Christian broker feels the night finally turning toward dawn. The hunchback's head lolls to one side as you and the Christian broker drag him deeper into the alleys, away from the reeking fish stall and toward the quieter residential streets. The fishmonger whimpers with each step, mumbling prayers to every saint he can name. You can practically hear his teeth clacking like dice in a cup. The broker, on the other hand, keeps his jaw set tight, his sandals scuffing over stray fennel seeds and scraps of onion peel. They pause behind a darkened bakery. The smell of stale bread and charred sesame clings to the walls. The broker leans against the cool brick, wiping sweat from his brow. He glances down at the corpse, its face still frozen in that eerie half-laugh. "He looks like he died giggling at his own joke," the broker mutters, voice flat with exhausted sarcasm. "Too bad he didn't die somewhere useful, like his own bed." He crouches down, rearranging the man's arms to fold neatly across his chest. In medieval Islamic law, corpses found in the street without known kin often ended up buried in unmarked graves. Historians still argue whether this custom emerged out of religious purity concerns or simply urban sanitation panic. Either way, if the guards found him here, questions would follow. And in Baghdad, questions were like scorpions, quick, painful, and best avoided barefoot. The fishmonger hovers nearby, wringing his thick hands. "What now?" he asks, voice trembling like a plucked oud string. The broker considers. Then, with a sigh that sounds like it comes from the soles of his feet, he says, "We pass him on." "Pass him on?" The fishmonger blinks. "Yes, we take him to someone else's doorstep. It's not noble, but it's practical. Besides, do you want to end your life hanging from a date palm in the palace courtyard? I hear the view's lovely, but the drop isn't." Together, they heft the hunchback once more, grunting with effort. His body is surprisingly heavy for its size, the stiffness of death making him awkward to carry, like hauling a rolled carpet studded with rocks. You follow as they shuffle through moonlit alleys lined with sleeping stray cats. And you note a fringe tidbit whispered in old Baghdad streets, that some cat keepers believed hunchbacks carried luck if touched before dawn, though you suspect this corpse is more curse than charm tonight. They arrive at a narrow timber house with shuttered windows painted blue. The fishmonger raps softly on the door. No answer. The broker lifts the latch and eases the door open just a crack. Inside, a thin glow of oil lamps reveals shelves stacked with ceramic jars and copper pans. The Christian broker nods at the fishmonger. Quick, together they prop the corpse upright against the inner wall. The broker adjusts the dead man's robes to appear as though he is merely slumped in sleep. The fishmonger's eyes bulge in terror. "What if they find him before dawn?" he whispers. "Then they find him," the broker says with a shrug. Better them than us. They step outside, easing the door closed. You can hear their breath quick and ragged in the quiet street. The two men stand for a moment, side by side, the broker rubbing his temples and the fishmonger mouthing silent prayers to saints, prophets, and probably a few lesser-known kitchen spirits for good measure. Historians still argue whether merchants like these were truly heartless or merely desperate men trapped under draconian city laws. Perhaps a bit of both. For now, though, they part ways. The fishmonger disappears into the alleys, head bowed in guilty relief. The Christian broker, however, remains for a moment, staring up at the cloudless sky where thin stars shimmer like hammered silver pins against black silk. He rubs his fingers together thoughtfully, feeling the faint slick of corpse sweat on his palms. "I need a drink," he mutters to himself, though you sense even an amphora of sweet date wine wouldn't wash this dread away. With weary steps, he begins walking back toward his small house at the edge of the market quarter. His sandals flap quietly on the beaten dirt road. At one corner, he pauses to buy a handful of roasted chickpeas from a sleepy vendor, popping them into his mouth mechanically. A joke flickers through his mind, something about chickpeas being less trouble than hunchbacks, but he is too tired to finish the thought. Around him, Baghdad sighs under the night breeze. Frankincense smoke curls from unseen windows, and the distant gurgle of rooftop water jars echoes in the stillness. You follow him past shuttered bakeries and silent prayer schools. The dawn is still hours away, and though the city sleeps, it feels alive with hidden eyes watching from behind mashrabia screens. Finally, he reaches his door. He leans his forehead against the wooden planks, feeling the coolness seep into his aching temples. "Just sleep," he whispers to himself. "Sleep, and tomorrow will fix itself." But as he fumbles for the latch, a loud knock rings out from the street behind him. He turns, heart thudding painfully, and sees a burly silhouette framed by torchlight, another merchant he knows, face pale with fear. "Broker," the man rasps. There's a dead hunchback in my house." The Christian broker lets out a sigh so deep, it feels like the earth itself might inhale alongside him. You stand frozen under the torchlit eaves, watching the Christian broker's face tighten like a drawn bowstring. The burly merchant before him breathes heavily, sweat gleaming on his bald scalp in the flickering glow. He grips the broker's arm so hard it almost bruises. "He's just sitting there against my kitchen wall," the man stammers. "I thought he was asleep until I smelled, until I realized." For a moment, silence drapes over the alley. The distant barking of dogs echoes down the street, mingling with the muffled snores of sleeping households. Then the broker sighs, his shoulders sagging with bone-deep exhaustion. "Fine," he mutters. "Show me." You follow them through the winding alleys back to the timber house with its painted shutters. Inside, lamplight casts trembling shadows over shelves lined with brass cooking pots, clay jars of pickled lemons, and baskets of coriander seeds. And there, exactly where he had been left, is the hunchback, his stiff body propped upright, chin slumped onto his chest as if in the final stages of a raucous laugh. The burly merchant crosses himself 3 times, his lips moving in rapid prayer. The Christian broker merely rubs his temples again. "Why did you even let him in?" he asks, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I didn't," the merchant squeaks. "He was just here." Historians still argue whether merchants shared unspoken pacts to dispose of such troublesome discoveries, or if each instance was an individual panic. Either way, tonight, the panic spreads like spilled ink. The broker bends down, flicking his fingers at the corpse's waxen cheeks. "Still dead," he observes dryly. "Just checking. Come on, together," With much muttered prayer and trembling effort, they lift the hunchback's body again. His limbs remain rigid, making him flop awkwardly like a poorly jointed puppet. You notice a fringe tidbit. In old Baghdad, it was believed that a corpse's soul lingered near its body until dawn prayers, listening to every word spoken about it. If so, this hunchback's spirit was certainly gathering a colorful collection of curses tonight. The Christian broker wipes his brow with his sleeve. "We need somewhere else," he says. "Preferably far from both of us." He scans the dark street. At the end of the lane stands a tall wooden door marked with an iron crescent, the Jewish doctor's house. "Perfect," he whispers. "No!" the merchant hisses, eyes bulging. "A doctor? He'll know he's dead in a blink." "Exactly," the broker retorts, "and he'll handle it according to law. It won't come back to us." They scurry down the street, shoes whispering on the packed dirt. As they approach, the scent of myrrh and boiled herbs wafts from the shuttered windows. The Christian broker gestures for silence. He raps lightly at the door. A few moments later, you hear the scrape of a lock. The door opens a crack, revealing a thin, bearded man with clever eyes and sleep-creased cheeks. "What is it?" he rasps. "Peace be upon you, doctor," the broker murmurs with feigned urgency. "This man, he choked while eating fish at the fishmonger's stall. We brought him to you before his spirit departs completely. Please, examine him." The doctor blinks away, sleep, stepping back to let them in. The merchant shoots the broker a look of pure terror, but together they shuffle inside. The house smells of eucalyptus oil and cumin broth. They lay the corpse down on a woven reed mat beside a flickering brass lamp. The doctor kneels, adjusting his spectacles, and presses a thin hand to the hunchback's throat. "He is cold as clay," he murmurs. "When did he choke?" the merchant stammers incoherently. The broker interjects smoothly. "Just an hour ago. Please, can you revive him?" The doctor leans closer, sniffing the corpse's lips, then gently pries open the stiffened jaws. He frowns, peering into the gaping mouth. You notice his fingers tremble slightly despite his professional calm. "This fishbone," he says softly, flicking out a slender splinter with an iron pick, "is lodged deep in his throat, but he has been dead far longer than an hour. At that," the merchant lets out a strangled whimper. The doctor turns his sharp gaze onto them both, eyes narrowing with suspicion. Historians still argue whether this doctor was among Baghdad's licensed physicians or merely a folk healer with wide city respect. But tonight his authority feels like that of a royal judge. "What have you done?" he asks coldly. "Nothing." The broker lies swiftly. "We found him like this. We only wanted to help." The doctor rises to his full height, small though he is, and points towards the door. "Leave him here. I will handle it from now. But know this, if city guards come, I will speak the truth." The merchant nods so vigorously his headscarf nearly slips off. The broker inclines his head with practiced dignity. "Thank you, doctor," he says softly. "May the Most High grant your hand success and your heart wisdom." They leave quickly, hearts pounding in their throats, the cool night air slapping against their sweat-damp faces as they stumble back into the silent street. Above them, the moon dips lower, gilding the alley walls in pale silver. The Christian broker exhales shakily, clutching his chest. "Well," he mutters with dark humor, "at least he's not in our kitchen anymore." The merchant doesn't respond. He merely staggers away into the shadows, whispering prayers with every faltering step. You stand under the thinning night as the Christian broker watches the burly merchant vanish into the labyrinth of alleys, his footsteps swallowed by the silence of sleeping Baghdad. The broker turns, peering back at the doctor's house. For a moment, He almost feels guilt claw at his chest like a stray cat desperate for scraps. Almost. But exhaustion flattens his conscience into numb resignation. He rubs his palms together, feeling the dried sweat and faint, oily residue of the corpse on his skin. He starts trudging home, sandals flapping softly. Each step echoes in your ears with the gentle cadence of a heartbeat. Dawn is approaching, and the first threads of gray light creep between rooftops lined with pigeon cages. Somewhere nearby, a muezzin clears his throat in preparation for the call to prayer. You hear the city stretch awake with little creaks and sighs, like an old man rising from sleep. The broker's stomach growls, reminding him that his last meal was stale bread dipped in lentil broth. He considers stopping for a cup of hot milk at the roadside dairy stall. But as he rounds a corner, a young boy sprints toward him, eyes wide with panic. "Broker! Broker!" he gasps. "Come quickly to the Jewish doctor's house. There is trouble." The broker's chest tightens with dread. He turns and runs after the boy, sandals slapping the dirt in frantic rhythm. You glide behind him, the cool dawn breeze stirring your robes as he arrives panting at the doctor's front door. A small crowd has gathered, whispering nervously. The doctor stands pale and trembling beside two palace guards clad in iron-studded leather vests. "What is happening here?" the broker demands, trying to keep his voice calm. The doctor points a shaking finger inside. "I woke just before dawn and went to examine the hunchback again. But as I tried to prop him upright to wash his face for burial, his head fell back and the splintered bone lodged deeper into his throat. He tumbled from my grip and..." The doctor swallows, tears glimmering in his eyes. "And he died all over again. It seemed..." I panicked. "I am sorry," the taller palace guard sneers, brushing dust from his iron helmet. "The Sultan will hear of this at first court today. Death under suspicious circumstances. Who brought him here?" The doctor hesitates, darting a fearful glance at the broker. For a heartbeat, you think he will reveal everything. But then he drops his gaze. "I found him on my doorstep. I tried to help, but it was too late." Historians still argue whether this doctor truly protected the broker or simply avoided further questioning to save his own skin. Either way, the guard gestures to his comrade, and together they lift the hunchback's stiff body onto a reed mat. You notice a fringe tidbit as they do so. Medieval undertakers believed that if a corpse's eyes remained open overnight, its spirit was trapped halfway to the afterlife. Thus, one guard carefully lowers the hunchback's eyelids with two gentle fingers before they carry him away. "You," the taller guard says, pointing at the broker, "come to the palace. The Sultan will want your testimony." The broker feels his knees nearly buckle. He opens his mouth to protest, but then snaps it shut, nodding mutely. What choice does he have? You trail behind him as he walks through awakening streets where sleepy bakers shovel fresh flatbread into glowing clay ovens and herders drive bleating goats to the city's east gate. They reach the great palace square as dawn light blooms golden across polished marble. Birds wheel overhead, cawing and swooping between minarets and domes. The broker steps into the long columned hall where the Sultan sits upon his cushioned throne, flanked by scribes, guards, and his vizier, whose calculating gaze flicks over every trembling petitioner like a hawk scanning for field mice. A eunuch herald calls out names, and soon the Christian broker is ushered forward alongside the doctor and the fishmonger, who has also been dragged here, looking as if he might faint at any moment. They kneel upon the cool, tiled floor, heads bowed low. The broker's forehead rests against the patterned stone, his heart hammering so hard you wonder if the Sultan can hear it thumping from his dais. The Sultan yawns delicately behind a lacquered fan of peacock feathers. "What is all this fuss so early?" he asks, voice as smooth as churned butter but cold as river stones. The taller guard bows low, recounting the entire story from the fishmonger's discovery to the corpse's arrival at the doctor's house. The Sultan raises an elegant eyebrow. A dead hunchback passed around the city like an unwanted copper coin? He chuckles softly, though his eyes remain sharp and unamused. And none of you thought to report this directly to my guards. Silence hangs heavy. The broker risks lifting his head slightly. He sees the hunchback's stiff body laid out upon a woven mat before the throne, face gray and waxy under the drifting incense smoke. Somewhere high above, pigeons coo and flutter between stone arches, breaking the quiet with their soft wings. The Sultan sighs. Very well. We will hear each confession. Then we will decide who shall be held responsible for this farce of death. The broker's breath catches in his throat, tasting of bile and fear. You kneel upon the cool marble floor as the Sultan gestures for the confessions to begin. The palace hall smells of rosewater, sandalwood, and human dread. Sunlight pours through the arched windows, catching motes of incense smoke and turning them into tiny drifting stars. Your knees ache, but you dare not shift. The Christian broker swallows hard, throat dry as sifted flour. The Sultan's vizier leans forward, dark eyes glittering beneath thick brows. You, he says, pointing a long, ink-stained finger at the fishmonger. Speak. The fishmonger lets out a strangled squeak, his cheeks wobbling with terror. He clutches his headscarf so tightly that his knuckles go white. Mercy, my lord, he whimpers. I found him dead behind my stall before dawn. I thought if the guards saw him there, they would accuse me of murder, so I called the broker for help. The Sultan raises an eyebrow, amusement flickering across his face. And your brilliant solution was to pass him off like a bad Durham? The fishmonger gulps audibly. The vizier sighs, as if explaining mathematics to a donkey. And then what? The fishmonger casts a trembling glance at the Christian broker, who bows his head low in silent acknowledgement of his turn. The vizier's gaze shifts to him. You, broker, explain yourself. You hear the Christian broker inhale shakily. My lord, he begins, voice wavering despite his best effort to appear calm. I merely tried to help my friend avoid unjust punishment. We thought to leave the body with someone who might know what to do. First the merchant, then the doctor. We did not intend harm. We feared for our lives. His words echo in the hushed hall. Historians still argue whether this confession truly captured his motives or merely reflected a man desperate to keep his neck from the hangman's noose. Either way, the Sultan tilts his head, considering him like a chess player sizing up a pawn's worth. And the doctor? The vizier prompts. The Jewish doctor clears his throat and adjusts his robe's collar. I was awoken before dawn to find the corpse left in my house. I examined him, discovered the fishbone lodged deep, and realized he was long dead. When I tried to wash his face for burial rites, his head fell back, and I panicked. I am sorry. My lord, the Sultan drums his fingers against his ivory armrest, eyes distant with thought. Then, he gestures lazily to his guards. Bring forward the tailor. You glance to the side as a thin man with henna-stained fingertips is led in, quaking so badly his knees knock together like chattering teeth. He falls prostrate before the throne, sobbing into the polished floor. Mercy, my Sultan, mercy upon my foolish soul. The Sultan waves an impatient hand. Enough noise. Speak! The tailor raises his tear-swollen face. My lord, it was I who fed him last night. We dined together. He was ever a jester, always making us laugh until our ribs hurt. I gave him fried fish. He choked while making one of his foolish jokes, and before I could help him, he died. A ripple of quiet amusement runs through the hall. The Sultan's lips twitch upward. So this corpse that has been traded around Baghdad all night like a merchant's empty purse was simply the victim of his own wit. The tailor nods miserably, tears dripping onto the marble. You note a fringe tidbit. Some medieval Baghdadis believed dying mid-laugh granted the soul swift passage to paradise. Perhaps that is the only comfort in this sorry tale. Historians still argue. The vizier murmurs softly beside the throne. Whether this anecdote truly happened as recorded in the Nights, or if it was a moral fable woven to warn merchants about cowardice and blame, the Sultan chuckles, eyes glimmering with dark humor. Regardless, it is a good story. Rise, tailor. You are forgiven your dinner hospitality. As for the rest of you, he surveys them all in silence, so thick it presses upon your ears. The Christian broker's stomach knots, nausea swirling in his gut. He braces for the worst. Then the Sultan laughs, a bright, sudden sound like copper coins tumbling onto a stone floor. Let this be a lesson to you trembling mice. A dead man causes less trouble than a living coward. Go home. May your sleep be dreamless, and your wares sell swiftly. The broker blinks, hardly daring to breathe. The fishmonger collapses into sobbing relief, clutching the hem of his own robe. The doctor bows deeply, murmuring a prayer of thanks under his breath. As they rise, guards usher them out into the blazing morning light. You walk alongside the broker as he shields his eyes with a trembling hand. The city hums with life. Donkeys bray under burdens of dates and olives. Water sellers call out in hoarse songs, and the perfume of baked bread curls from shop fronts like invisible ribbons of warmth. The broker inhales deeply, chest tight with gratitude and fatigue. I thought today would end at the gallows, he mutters, almost to himself. Then he lets out a short, sharp laugh. Instead, I get to end it selling rose oil and damask again. Lucky me, he pats his sash pouch, feeling the last of his coins, and begins trudging back toward the market streets, toward another day of bargaining, of sweet flattery, and of stories that might just keep him alive until tomorrow. You follow the Christian broker as he weaves back through Baghdad's awakening streets, his feet dragging slightly with each step. The golden dawn light bathes the clay buildings, catching on metal-studded doors and glowing along strings of drying dates hung from shaded awnings. Roosters crow behind walls, and sleepy sellers sweep dust from their thresholds. The broker feels each grain of grit under his sandals, each aching pulse in his calves, a reminder that he is alive, and for now, unpunished. As he nears the market, he pauses by a tea vendor setting out tiny brass cups on a low table. The broker lowers himself onto a worn stool with a sigh that sounds like it's been waiting all night to leave his chest. The vendor, a wiry old man with eyebrows like bent feathers, pours steaming tea dark as walnut stain. The broker thanks him softly and cups the warm brass between his tired palms. He closes his eyes for a moment, letting the aroma of black tea and cardamom swirl through his nose. A memory drifts up unbidden, of his mother telling him that cardamom cleansed the tongue and calmed the heart. Historians still argue whether this spice was first cultivated in southern India or spread northward from early Persian trade routes. But here in Baghdad, it is simply morning comfort in a cup. Opening his eyes, he stares into the rippling surface of the tea. He sees his own weary reflection, wavering and lined with shadows. The tea vendor grunts softly. Rough night, broker? The broker lets out a small, humorless laugh. You could say a man died for my troubles. Better him than you. The vendor shrugs, already wiping down his counter with brisk strokes. Death comes for us all, but debt comes faster. That draws a faint smile to the broker's lips. Weary, but real. He drinks, feeling the hot liquid scald his tongue before sliding warmly down his throat. The aches in his chest loosen a little, the fog in his mind thinning. Nearby, a young beggar sweeps the alley, gathering onion skins, wilted mint sprigs, and a few crusts of discarded flatbread into her reed basket. She hums an old melody under her breath. The broker watches her for a moment, then reaches into his sash and tosses her a small bronze coin. Her eyes light up like dawn itself. He finishes his tea, thanks the vendor again, and rises, joints cracking like ancient roof beams, slinging his sack of unsold wares across his shoulder. He begins the slow walk to his market stall. Each step is accompanied by the sleepy chorus of Baghdad waking, goats bleating as they're led to slaughter yards, pigeons flapping down to dusty courtyards to peck at scattered grain, shopkeepers rattling iron locks from their shuttered stalls. As he turns onto the main market street, he sees his familiar awning of striped blue and cream fabric. He exhales softly, feeling an unexpected tenderness bloom in his chest at the sight of his own little corner of the world. A place where, despite debts, despite idiotic merchants with dead hunchbacks, he is at least himself, the Christian broker, known for honey-sweet words and quick silver bargains. He sets down his sack, rolls out his reed mat, and arranges his wares in neat, tempting lines: glass bottles of rose water, ivory combs carved with peacock motifs, folded damask cloths in crimson and cobalt. He lifts a damask square and rubs it between his fingers, checking its smoothness. Nearby, a rival merchant hawks Persian prayer rugs, his chant rising and falling like a muezzin's call. The broker glances at him and smirks faintly. "Those rugs are thinner than a miser's heart," he mutters under his breath. He notices a cluster of new arrivals entering the market gates. Merchants from Mosul, their donkeys draped in striped blankets, and a pair of serious-eyed monks in dark robes, one clutching a small casket carved with crosses. You see him stand a little straighter, clearing his throat, ready to don his trader's mask once more. A fringe tidbit flits through your mind. In medieval Baghdad, brokers like him were often required to hold a formal license from the market inspector, called the muhtasib, who ensured scales were honest and prices fair. Whether this broker ever paid his inspection bribes, well, historians still argue. And judging by his sly half-smile, you suspect he found a way to negotiate even that. He turns to you, as if sensing your quiet watchfulness, and raises his eyebrows with sardonic humor. "Well," he murmurs softly, "no one said survival was clean work. But at least today, I only have to sell rose water, not corpses." You watch him greet his first customer, a stout matron with henned hands and a fierce, haggling glint in her eyes. His words flow sweet and quick, coaxing, teasing, praising. Around him, the market swells with voices, laughter, and the clink of bronze coins. The rising sun gilds his wares, turning simple glass and cloth into treasures under its blessing. And just for a moment, standing there under Baghdad's dawning sky, he feels alive enough to laugh. The morning deepens into mid-morning as the Christian broker weaves deftly through sales, each greeting dripping with honeyed charm. You stand by as he unfurls bolt after bolt of damask cloth for a wealthy matron, praising the crimson weave as deep as pomegranate skin under harvest sun, until she blushes and nods, flicking her fingers for her servant to count out silver coins. He bows deeply, hands clasped to his chest in gratitude, then turns swiftly to a new customer, voice shifting from regal flattery to playful teasing in a blink. His mind drifts, though, even as his tongue performs its trained dance. The memory of the hunchback's stiff, grimacing corpse haunts him like the sour aftertaste of cheap wine. He remembers the dead man's mouth half open, eyes glazed with an unreadable secret, and a shiver skitters down his spine despite the rising heat of the market day. He shakes off the unease and focuses on the current sale, tiny bottles of rose oil etched with curling vines. A portly merchant from Basra sniffs one and grunts disinterestedly. The broker leans closer and whispers conspiratorially, "My friend, this is not oil. It is bottled spring dawn. Dab it on your beard, and your wife will sigh like a girl again." The Basran merchant chuckles and buys 2 bottles. Historians still argue whether rose oil was truly distilled in Baghdad's back alleys during this century, or imported in secret caravans from Shiraz. Regardless, to the Christian broker, it is simply profit. As midday approaches, heat gathers under the awnings, turning shadows into relief from an almost suffocating sun. The broker steps back from his stall, wiping sweat from his brow with the edge of his sash. He accepts a clay cup of cool tamarind water from a passing seller, sipping slowly as he surveys the churning market, donkeys braying under sacks of millet, children darting between stalls clutching fig cakes, and a veiled harpist strumming a mournful tune in a shaded corner. He closes his eyes briefly, letting the music trickle through him. A fringe tidbit drifts into his thoughts. It was said that harpists in medieval Baghdad often wrapped thin strips of lion gut around their wrist for strength of playing fingers. Though how many lions approved of that tradition is debatable. He opens his eyes again to find a palace herald striding down the central thoroughfare, flanked by 2 guards. The herald's polished sandals slap the stone rhythmically as he announces in a deep, resonant voice, "By order of the Sultan, those involved in the matter of the hunchback shall attend court again this evening to hear final decrees." The broker feels his heart lurch painfully against his ribs. He sets down the tamarind cup with trembling fingers. Around him, other merchants murmur, their eyes following the herald as he passes. The broker's knees almost buckle under him, but he plants his feet firmly and inhales a shaky breath. "Of course," he mutters under his breath with grim humor, "because my life isn't nerve-shredding enough already." He packs away his most valuable wares, the ivory combs and rose oil bottles, wrapping them tightly in soft cloth and tucking them beneath the stall platform. Then he ties his sash tighter around his waist, feeling its comforting snugness. The sun's glare gleams off brass scales and polished lanterns, burning bright enough to sting his eyes. For a moment, he squeezes them shut, praying silently to the God of Abraham, the God of David, the God of weary brokers everywhere. Historians still argue whether daily court summonses were common punishment or reserved for cases that amused the Sultan. Today, the broker knows he is not attending as a criminal, merely as a player in an absurd story the ruler enjoys retelling. He reopens his stall, forcing a calm smile onto his lips. 2 foreign traders approach, their beards braided with gold thread, and he greets them with a low bow. As they examine his damask and linen bolts, he praises each color like a bard reciting poetry. Beneath his elegant words, though, his mind quivers with dread. Each heartbeat counts down to evening court, and every glance at the westward sun tightens his chest further. A gust of hot breeze lifts his awning briefly, revealing the market beyond, bustling, sunlit, deaf to his private terror. He exhales slowly. There is nothing to do but sell until summoned. He lifts a bolt of cobalt blue damask, holding it up so the sunlight turns it to liquid sapphire before their eyes. "See this weave?" he murmurs, voice rich and lilting. It was spun in Damascus by hands that have never known failure, and as the traders nod in appreciation, you sense that even under looming fear, The Christian broker clings to his craft like a drowning man clings to driftwood, because in a world ruled by sultans and fate, words are his only shield. The sun dips low, smearing molten orange across the domes and minarets of Baghdad as the Christian broker gathers his wares with trembling fingers. Each fold of damask cloth feels heavier than usual, as if it too dreads the evening's summons. He ties his bundles with quick knots and slips his remaining coins into the hidden inner pouch of his sash. As he locks his stall's wooden shutters, he whispers a prayer under his breath, not for forgiveness, not for favor, but for sheer survival. You follow him through the darkening alleys toward the palace, each step echoing softly off clay walls. A stray cat slinks past, tail high, pausing only to yawn at the broker as if mocking his terror. Lamps flicker to life one by one, painting golden pools of trembling light along the street. The smell of roasting lamb and coriander drifts from hidden kitchens, mingling with sandalwood smoke curling from brass censers by doorways. His stomach churns with nausea, though he hasn't eaten since dawn. A fringe tidbit flits through your mind. Medieval Baghdad's street vendors sold a sour chickpea porridge called lablabi to soothe anxious bellies. But the broker knows no meal will settle his roiling fear tonight. He reaches the palace gates, their towering wooden panels inlaid with iron scrollwork and brass studs shaped like lotus buds. Guards usher him through marble courtyards echoing with the splash of fountains. He passes gardens scented with night-blooming jasmine and water lily pools glowing faintly under lantern light. The hush of dusk cloaks everything in solemn beauty that only deepens his dread. Finally, he enters the grand hall, where the Sultan reclines upon a vast cushioned dais, draped in silk robes the color of moonlit water. His vizier sits cross-legged at his side, black-bearded and sharp-eyed, ink stains marking his calloused fingers. The hunchback's body lies upon a reed mat near the dais, shrouded in embroidered linen. Incense coils rise from brass censers set around the corpse, sweetening the smell of death with myrrh and frankincense. "Welcome again, broker," the Sultan murmurs, voice echoing through the silent hall. "Your day has been productive, I trust?" The broker bows low, forehead brushing the cool marble. "My Sultan, you honor me beyond my worth." The Sultan chuckles softly. "Flattery suits you better than fear." He gestures to a eunuch who steps forward carrying a tall, lacquered box. The eunuch kneels and opens it, revealing stacked layers of gold coins, each stamped with the Sultan's calligraphy seal. Gasps ripple among the courtiers. "I have called you back." The Sultan continues lazily. "Because your story of the hunchback amused me. His foolish death, your foolish panic, the passing of his corpse like a merchant's spoiled date. These things remind me that life is nothing but a caravan of absurdities." He gestures, and the eunuch lifts one layer of gold coins, revealing beneath it a set of silk robes folded neatly, dyed deepest midnight blue, and embroidered with crescent moons in silver thread. The Sultan's gaze rests upon the broker, sharp yet amused. "Take these," he orders softly. "Gold for your troubles, robes for your dignity, and remember, the next time a corpse troubles your doorstep, bring him straight to me. I do so love a good story." Historians still argue whether this moment truly occurred, or if later scribes embroidered it to illustrate the Sultan's capricious generosity. The broker, however, feels no doubt as tears blur his vision and relief shudders through his exhausted body. He bows again so deeply it almost cracks his spine. "May your reign be long, and your heart light with laughter. My Sultan, go," the Sultan murmurs, already turning away to listen to a juggler recount his day's tricks. "And live wisely," The dead are lighter than debt, but they burden the living all the same. As guards escort him from the hall, the broker clutches the lacquered box tightly against his chest. The coins chime softly with each step, a lullaby of sudden, bewildering fortune. You trail him back through silent marble corridors, past moonlit fountains and whispering cypress trees, until he emerges into the cool night air of Baghdad. He stands for a long moment at the gates, staring up at the swollen silver moon. Its glow turns his tears to quick silver tracks down his dusty cheeks. Around him, the city hums with its endless chorus of donkey brays, sandalwood smoke, and snatches of song drifting from rooftop gatherings. Finally, he lets out a trembling laugh, the soft, disbelieving kind, as if testing whether his voice still works. "Well," he whispers to himself, "I suppose a corpse isn't such bad business after all." With weary steps, he begins the long walk home, clutching his unexpected treasure as the moon bathes Baghdad's ancient streets in its tender, indifferent light. You follow the Christian broker as he weaves through Baghdad's silent midnight streets, his robe whispering around his ankles, the lacquered box heavy in his arms. Each coin within chimes with every step, a glittering chorus promising freedom from debt, or at least a week's worth of it. The silver-threaded robe tucked beside the gold glows faintly when he lifts the lid to peek, its moons and crescents catching stray lantern light like tiny night skies folded into cloth. His sandals slap quietly on packed earth and worn flagstones. The moon hangs full above him, fat and pale as a peeled fig, watching his slow, meandering journey. Despite the cool breeze, sweat beads on his neck. He keeps glancing over his shoulder, half expecting a palace guard to come sprinting after him, demanding the treasure back as a jest gone too far. But no one follows, only shadows, cats, and the rustle of date palms in the stillness. Historians still argue whether the Sultan's gift was a genuine reward or a subtle punishment, marking the broker forever as a man whose wealth came from corpse panic farce. But tonight, to the broker, it feels like a pardon from death itself. He reaches his modest house at the edge of the market quarter, pausing to press his forehead to the heavy wooden door. Its warmth, stored from the afternoon sun, seeps into his skin. He closes his eyes and lets out a trembling breath. Inside, the house is dark and silent. He sets the lacquered box down carefully upon his sleeping mat and kneels before it, bowing low in gratitude, his forehead brushing the cool reed mat. A fringe tidbit slips through your mind. In medieval Baghdad, it was common to recite Surah al-Fatiha over any new wealth before touching it, to purify its origins and ward off jealousy. Tonight, the broker merely whispers a quick prayer under his breath. Too exhausted for full ritual, he stands and pours himself a cup of stale water from a clay jar. It tastes of dust and clay, but he drinks it down in 3 grateful gulps, wiping his lips with the back of his hand. His body feels carved from lead, each muscle heavy with fatigue. He glances toward his sleeping mat and robe hook, intending to lie down and surrender to blessed unconsciousness. But sleep will not come easily tonight, not with the ghost of the hunchback hovering behind his eyelids, frozen in that half-laugh with fishbone teeth. The broker rubs his temples, trying to scrub away the memory. He chuckles softly, dark humor curling under his words. "Imagine," he murmurs, dying mid-joke and becoming the punchline forever. He paces the small room, bare feet scuffing the reed mats, past shelves lined with glass rosewater bottles, chipped ceramic cups, and a brass oil lamp carved with griffins. Outside, the call of a lone night heron echoes from the riverbank, hollow and mournful. The broker pauses by his tiny window, peering out at the still street bathed in moonlight. From here, Baghdad looks peaceful, even innocent. But he knows its alleys are filled with hidden debts, whispered bribes, and men who pass corpses around like rotting dates. He thinks again of the Sultan's parting words. The dead are lighter than debt, but they burden the living all the same. The broker chuckles under his breath. Easy for a man with 30 vaults of gold to say. At last, he kneels before the lacquered box once more and lifts the silk robe from within. The silver moons gleam like trapped night. He runs it through his fingers slowly, feeling its fine weave, lighter than a sigh. Carefully, he folds it back and lays it by his mat. The gold coins he leaves in their lacquered cradle. Their promise of fleeting security is too loud to hold close tonight. He blows out his oil lamp and lies down on his side, curling his knees up to his chest. The cool mat soothes his aching bones. The moonlight streams in, painting silver bars across the floor and his bare feet. He stares at them until his vision blurs. Historians still argue whether the broker ever wore the Sultan's robe, or whether he sold it the next dawn to pay off debts and stock rose oil for another week. The records end here, with him lying in the quiet dark, listening to the pigeons cooing on his rooftop rafters and the faint scrape of beetle legs across clay tiles, and as sleep tiptoes toward him on quiet, padded feet. He whispers softly into the silent room. At least I live to see another dawn. You awaken before dawn alongside the Christian broker, though in truth, he has barely slept. He lies staring at the low ceiling beams, listening to the first stirrings of pigeons overhead. Their coos and soft wing beats echo through his tiny house, like distant drums heralding another day of markets, bargains, and debts. Slowly, with a weary groan, he pushes himself upright. His joints ache, his neck stiff from curling on the mat. He glances at the lacquered box of gold coins resting near his head, its polished surface glowing dully in the blue-gray light before sunrise. For a long moment, he simply watches it, the promise of wealth feeling almost unreal, a dream brought back from some fevered sleep. Historians still argue whether the Sultan ever summoned him again, amused by a new misadventure, or if he vanished quietly from the records after spending his reward. For the broker himself, this morning is the only certainty. He drags himself to standing, ties his fraying sash around his waist, and steps outside into the cool pre-dawn streets. The city is silent, but for the muezzin's call rising from distant minarets, weaving through the air like a solemn song. Shadows stretch long across the packed earth road, and the sky blushes with the faintest hint of rose and tangerine on the horizon. He walks to the neighborhood water cellar to buy a ladleful for washing his face. The copper basin is cold, biting his skin awake. As he rubs his cheeks dry with his sleeve, a passing neighbor, the old perfume merchant with the drooping mustache, nods to him sleepily. "Early again, broker," he mutters. "Sleep is for the debtless," the broker replies, forcing a wry grin. The merchant snorts, adjusts his wool cap, and shuffles away with a limp, sandals scraping the dust. The broker watches him go, then turns back toward his house, feeling the rose-petal dawn bloom slowly above Baghdad's rooftops. A fringe tidbit crosses your mind. Ancient Baghdadis often mixed rosewater into morning ablutions to ward off sorrow. Today, the broker merely splashes plain water on his eyes, muttering under his breath. There is no perfume sweet enough to erase yesterday. Inside, he kneels before the lacquered box again. He counts the coins with careful fingers, stacking them into neat towers. Each chime of metal on metal fills his silent room with promises, of paying off his linen supplier, of mending his leaking roof, of buying 3 jars of fresh cardamom oil to sell at festival market. But for all its gleam, gold cannot erase memory. He thinks of the hunchback's dead grin, the fishbone lodged deep in his throat, the terrified fishmonger, the trembling doctor, the Sultan's amused gaze. The dead are lighter than debt, the Sultan had said, but their burden lasts longer. The broker exhales softly, feeling that weight press down upon his chest like a sleeping cat refusing to move. He rises and unwraps the silver-mooned robe. It rustles like whispered secrets, holding it up to the dawn light streaming through his window slats. He studies its delicate embroidery, each crescent curling elegantly under his gaze. Part of him longs to keep it forever, to drape it over his shoulders and stride through the market as a man who once amused a sultan. But practicality gnaws at his ribs like hunger. Wealth in cloth is still just cloth until traded for coin. He folds it with aching reverence, ties it in his sash, and steps out into the warming streets. Already, donkey carts creak past, piled high with melons, copper pots, and date baskets. Market criers test their voices with half-shouted greetings. He breathes deeply of the rising scents: baking flatbread, charcoal smoke, donkey sweat, and sweet, ripening figs. The noise of waking Baghdad washes over him, and he feels, despite everything, profoundly alive. Historians still argue whether this broker lived out his days peacefully, wealthy from rose oil and damask sales, or if he ended with nothing but debts and fading tales of the night he met a dead hunchback and left court carrying a sultan's gold. The city remembers him only as a passing shadow, a half-joke woven into the tapestry of its endless market days. But as you watch him stride into the market square, the robe hidden under his sash and the lacquered box tucked under his arm, you know this. He carries forward not only gold, but a story. And in Baghdad, stories are worth as much as any coin. He glances skyward one last time, squinting at the blazing morning sun cresting the city walls, and chuckles softly. "At least," he whispers under his breath, "today begins without a corpse at my feet." You ease yourself deeper into your pillow, feeling the weight of these quiet market streets settle gently in your chest. Imagine the Christian broker now, fading into the golden haze of Baghdad's awakening day. His footsteps soft against dust-smoothed stone, the faint chiming of gold coins hidden in his sash, a rhythm of reassurance under his beating heart. The world around him breathes with silent secrets. Rooftop pigeons coo softly. Stray cats stretch in narrow alleys, and the sweet scent of fresh-baked bread curls like a tender sigh through the dawn air. You sense him pausing by his stall, rolling open the blue and cream awning, hands moving slowly but surely, folding each cloth, arranging each glass vial, sweeping last night's dreams into today's simple purpose. His eyelids feel heavy with a sleep denied but soon to come. The city hums low around him, like the gentle whir of a distant fan, soothing your own tired mind. You picture that, a fan spinning softly in your room now, humming over your skin, cooling each quiet breath you draw. Your body feels loose, heavy, content. In the hush before sleep claims you completely, imagine drifting alongside the broker as he pours rose water into a brass dish, the ripples catching pale morning light, shimmering like moonlit silk. The scent rises warm and floral, lulling your senses further. You hear his quiet chuckle in the shadows of your thoughts, the final note of his absurd journey. Let it all drift away now, the bustling markets, the cold coins, the Sultan's amused eyes. Let only the hush remain, settling over you like a velvet night sky, vast and calm, Sleep comes quietly, tender as a last whispered blessing.